The United States has imposed sanctions on Iran's commercial airliner following allegations of a plot to kill the Saudi ambassador on American soil. Well, assets belonging to Mahan Air have now been frozen, and the United States says more sanctions will follow. Well, this after 2 men were charged with trying to pay Mexican gangsters to assassinate the ambassador. Washington says Tehran backed the plan, but the Islamic Republic has hit back, calling those claims outrageous.
An alleged plot that could further strain relations between Iran and the U.S. Washington says it has foiled a plan by Iranian agents to assassinate the Saudi ambassador to Washington and bomb the Saudi and Israeli embassies. Mansour Babsyar, an Iranian American, was arrested at New York's JFK airport on September 29th.
The complaint alleges that this conspiracy was conceived, was sponsored, and was directed from Iran.
His accomplice is believed to be Gholam Shakouri, a member of the Quds Force, a unit of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, but he remains at large. Iran has dismissed the allegations, which its UN ambassador calls an evil conspiracy. The US and Iran broke off their diplomatic ties over 30 years ago. Washington has since accused Iran of supporting international terrorism. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton vowed to further isolate Iran and threatened to impose new sanctions.
We will be consulting with our friends and partners around the world about how we can send a very strong message that this kind of action, which violates international norms, must be ended.
The U.S. and Saudi Arabia are now set to be discussing the possibility of taking the matter to the Security Council.
Well, for more on that story, I'm joined here in the studio by Reza Pahlavi. He's the son of the late Shah of Iran. Many thanks indeed for being with us this evening.
Thank you for being here again.
It's good to have you. Now, we just heard there that the United States seems pretty convinced that Tehran had a hand in this. They knew it was going on, that they even backed this alleged plot. What do you think? Do you think that the Iranians would take such a huge risk?
Well, first of all, it's not against the regime's character once you get to know the real, fabric of this regime. Understand one thing, the more the regime is getting fragile and fragmented from within towards an implosion, the more likely it is to attempt desperate acts such as this one. As to the nature of the conflict, it's not an undeclared war. Long has Tehran had the ambition of expanding by means of exporting a revolution with an idea of regional hegemony under some kind of a modern-day Shiite caliphate, which is obviously at odds and directly implicates Iran's conflict with Saudi Arabia, which is the exact antithesis in the sense of the Sunni world and its leadership. As such, they can't both live together in the region from Tehran's perspective. But it's well beyond just a regional conflict. The consequence of this regime now is spreading all over. And the sad thing about all this is, had there been more pressure, where the Tehran, in terms of its behavior versus its own citizenry and acts of violence, has allowed it to have the gall to now even dare go well beyond its borders, all the way in the Western Hemisphere in a town like Washington to assassinate a foreign diplomat. This is getting outrageous.
And the other influence, of course, is the Arab Spring, or the uprisings in countries in the region. Iran and Saudi Arabia are both jostling for influence in those countries, aren't they?
Well, look, irrespective of certain governments, the truth about this movement is that today we have a generation across the Islamic world that can no longer take no for an answer. It's a demand for aspiration to democracy, freedom, and self-determination. Whether in Yemen or in Turkey or in Syria or in Libya or in Iran or in Morocco, the whole point is that there's a new generation that is now in play. And in fact, if you look at the Green Movement in Iran and its impact on the streets of Cairo back when it started, they were sort of inspired by what happened in Iran and perhaps vice versa. Iranians today are following very closely what's happening in our close neighborhood in Syria, for instance. And indeed, I think the formula gets to a point that it is time now for people to get the hope that the world has finally heeded their call and will take this matter very seriously now that it's open warfare, literally.
Now, the last attempt at an uprising in Iran was put down very violently back in 2009. Do you think, given what's been happening in the region, there might be a resurgence? And what role would you like to play in that?
Well, I believe it was indeed a lost opportunity, but not all is lost. The movement is still alive and well, even though its leadership is being quashed severely by the regime, and we should not allow for this movement to be orphaned, which is precisely why secular democratic forces in Iran, who are forming more and more a union to face the regime as an alternative to a theocracy, are assembling more and more to try to find a common plan of action as to how to go about this now and how to carry out whatever we can do as a nation to free ourselves from the regime. And I think this is where the international community could step in the sense that beyond sanction as an external means of pressure, to in fact engage these forces after 32 years of having only dialogue with the regime and its representatives, and engage our diaspora, engage our civil society, engage democratic forces, not so different than what we've trying to do in other countries, but let it be done at the hand of the people themselves if we want to have the most legitimate outcome, not by means of internal or external military intervention, for instance, which will not work and will not be credible.
All right, Reza Pahlavi, many thanks indeed.
Thank you for the opportunity.